Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Lynne and we talked about red flags in role playing. Things that you can notice from yourself or from other players that might give you a little note that you might want to adjust something in your game to make sure that everybody is having the best time possible at the table. I'll jump across to that interview in just a moment, but first, remember to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel. It helps us out and it lets us make more content like this. Thanks.
One of the main ones is obviously someone either deliberately or inadvertently hogging the spotlight. This is supposed to be a collaborative storytelling experience, so you don't want one person monopolizing the GM's attention, directing what everybody else is doing, ordering people around. And I mean, most of the time, it's usually because people are just so enthusiastic that they get a bit carried away. They're enjoying themselves solving the mystery, they're enjoying playing their character, they're not necessarily thinking about it. So a good thing for a GM to keep an eye on is just to make sure that everybody's getting their moment in the sun, basically. I mean, you do get some players who are just very quiet and they may not want to speak up. They may not necessarily have the confidence to speak up. Excuse me. So they may not necessarily have the confidence to speak up, but the GM should just try and involve them. They should specifically ask them, is there anything your character wants to do? Does your character have a thought on this? Just things like that. But try and do it so that you're also not just singling them out, because if they are shy and unsure, really flashing the spotlight on them is possibly going to also just make them freeze like a rabbit in the headlights. So it's really just that balance of being aware and trying to encourage everybody to contribute in a way that suits them.
I think that's a good point. You want to strike the balance correctly. Speaking of striking a balance and trying not to do too much of a good thing, do you think that there are any red flags that emerge from you kind of coming from a good place and like an overzealous position? One of the things that I've run into a few times is that I learned early on that it's exciting to not rely too heavily on social checks, a persuade check or an intimidate check to roll out a scene if people want to role play. But at the same time, you don't want to throw that too much at people because some people like having the dice there. They don't want to role play out every scene, and it's a good resource. You don't want to take that away. Are there things like that where going too far, even if it's from a good place, can cause a problem?
Well, yes, and it's part of learning your trade. As a GM, no one's expecting you to be perfect at it out of the gate. It's something that requires practice. We always learn more from mistakes than we do from getting it right the first time. So, don't be afraid to not quite be perfect when you're doing it. Just make a note of it. Remember for next time. If you do get a bit over enthusiastic, that's actually really quite nice because it shows that you're invested in the story too. And I think sometimes people forget that the GM's there to have fun as well. It's a lot of work being a GM. It's a lot of responsibility. And if you've got nice players, they will appreciate that and meet you part way with the collaboration. But don't beat yourself up basically if you don't get it right first time.
I
We
want to
all make
see
mistakes, even though we've been doing this for years.
I want to seize on something you said. If you make a mistake, you can note it down. You can try again for next time. If you do make a mistake and you've got it noted down, what are some of the things you can do in your downtime, in the space between the sessions to make sure that you try and correct something? Is it always just talk to your players? Are there any particular tips that you have to try and improve your games in between sessions?
Yeah, check with your players afterwards. Have sort of like what we would call in LARPing a debrief. So at the end of the session, if you've got time, just have a quick chat with your players and go, how did that go? Did this work? Did that work? Or, well, I didn't quite get that right. I misremembered a rule and I just thought we'd go with it for this bit, but it should have been this. Do you want to go with the actual version next time? Are you happy with it working this way? Just talk to your players. I mean, if it is something that you misremembered a rule, you just go back to the rule books and refresh your memory and make a little note so you've got it for next time. And that's really all you can do is just talk to people, make sure that they're enjoying themselves, that nothing is upsetting them, that they understand that if you did make a mistake, it it was a genuine mistake. You're not trying to do anything to deliberately penalize somebody. You know, say you'd asked them to, you'd given them a penalty to dive for something you shouldn't have done. That you're not. It was just, you know, a genuine cock up, if you'll pardon the French, rather than you're deliberately doing that because it's that particular player.
As someone with the benefit of a lot of experience in the role playing scene, I'd love to ask you something that I know that a lot of my friends, particularly those who are new to the hobby, run across quite a bit. And that is when they have a player or, you know, a GM, if they are a player, who is displaying a bunch of red flags and then not addressing them if they have somebody in their group who is causing active problems. And I know a lot of people don't really know how to address that, and it's tough. It's not an easy thing to address. As somebody who has been playing for a long time, does it get easier? Is there a magic solution that presents itself?
Sadly, no. It's never easy to have those discussions. It's really not, usually because you're playing with friends. So obviously, if you're playing with friends, you don't want to create a fuss, you don't want to create bad feeling at the table. But the whole point is that if you don't address it, you are going to end up with bad feeling at the table. Um, the easiest, well, it's not the easiest way, because it's never an easy conversation, is for the GM to quietly take the player to one side and have a word with them, because they may not realize what they're doing. You hope in most cases that they don't. Um, you know, maybe if it's the players might want to have a word with their fellow player if they think they're causing an option. You know, if the GM is behaving in a particular way, the players don't like, that the players may wish to nominate a player to talk to them, because it's usually easier to deal with these things to start with on a one-on-one basis, rather than it having a whole group talking to one person, so that person doesn't feel like they're being got at, if you know what I mean. But sometimes, sadly, people's play styles just don't mesh. And if you need to walk away, walk away. Because there's no point staying in a situation that's making you deeply unhappy and that you're not enjoying. And that counts for the GM as much as it does the players.